And that allows, meaning takes us into allowable growth.
Yes.
Just what is that term, allowable growth, and how does it impact your planning for the budget?
Yeah, allowable growth is an interesting concept, and it's unique to the state of Iowa within the funding. And I think there's a slide as well that shows kind of the term allowable growth. And this is the state percentage of growth that the state legislature sets on an annual basis. And that allowable growth, now called supplemental state aid, is a percentage that is added each year to the cost per student, which is a misnomer. It's not a cost per student, but it's amount that is generated per student across the state. And you take that number times the number of students that you have, and that generates your baseline funding that you receive as a school district that you can spend for programming in your school district.
And here is our allowable growth rate history, and just looking at those figures quickly here, Doug Nefsker, explain that a little bit, how those fluctuations occur and the impact.
Well, it becomes very difficult from a budgeting process to be able to sit down and develop a budget for a school year, first without knowing what your revenue stream is going to be, because we're all based on that. And then with the last few years, it's also been the additional impact of the legislature not being able to come to an agreement on what that supplemental state aid amount would be until extremely late in the session. All Iowa schools across the state are required to certify their budgets by April 15th. And without having any indication from the legislature what those dollars are going to be for subsequent school years, does make it very difficult for us to be able to accurately and adequately plan for our students' needs for the subsequent school year.
And Dr. Pattee, that happened just this past summer, I should say at the end of the legislative session, and kind of review that a little bit of what resulted from the action there, or inaction, at the state level.
Right. We had to make some assumptions within our budgeting process this past year because the legislature did not pass the allowable growth or the supplemental state aid until late in the session. And in fact, we started the new fiscal year not knowing what actually our budget numbers would be because of the veto by the governor, which happened at the first week in July, I believe, right before July 4th. So we had quite a few unknowns moving into this fiscal year, which is very, very challenging as a school district as you look to plan, as you look to ensure the programs are in place for that school year as well into the future. And I think if you go back to that slide with the allowable growth, you can see since 2010, there's not been a lot of consistency with allowable growth. It's really bumped up and down. And historically, we have actually fallen behind some of the inflationary rates. And even if you're a growing district like Cedar Falls is, we are still trying to catch up with the ongoing increases of heating and cooling our buildings, the ongoing increases of running our buses and fuel costs, trying to make sure that we are keeping up with the cost of health care and those other expenses. So we have been in some really difficult positions, especially with the late funding, but also the inadequacy of some of the funding for student learning and programs.